My sister ran off on her wedding day, and my dad couldn't pay back the bride price. So he was going to offer me to Eric instead. Do you really think your daughters are goddesses? The Smiths is just some revolving door? Either you give me back the 100 million, or you can go feed the fishes in the high seas. I took a deep breath, clenched my jaw, and pushed the door open, forcing myself to look calm. Eric, please give us a chance. We'll pay back the money. The next second, the man who had just been roaring with rage turned beet red. What money? Pay back what? Oh, right, the bride price I owe you, isn't it? 100 million? No, how about 200 million? Or, just name your price. A month ago, Eric, the head of the Smiths, gave my family a bride price of $100 million to marry my sister. My dad was so ecstatic he couldn't sleep for 3 days. But on the wedding day, my sister took the money and ran. My dad couldn't produce the money and was terrified of crossing the Smiths. So, bright and early, he dragged me to the Smiths' villa, hoping to pawn me, his younger daughter, off on Eric. I stood outside the study, listening to the furious sound of things being smashed inside. The wedding is about to start, and you're telling me she ran off. The Wilsons has some nerve, trying to play me for a fool. Eric, we wouldn't dare, I have another daughter. She's beautiful too, maybe. My dad's voice was trembling, humble to the point of breaking. But before he could finish, his words were swallowed by Eric's deafening roar. You can't pay me back, so you want to send another one in? Do you really think your daughters are some kind of prize? That my family's door is that easy to walk through? He paused, his deep voice turning bone-chilling. Since you don't have 100 million, you can go feed the fishes in the high seas. Suddenly, there was a dull thud. I didn't have to see it to know what my father was doing. While our family was well off, compared to a powerhouse like the Smiths, we were nothing. Especially since Eric had connections everywhere, legit and otherwise. In H-Town, he was basically God. He had 100 ways to make the Wilsons disappear without a trace. The situation seemed hopeless. I bit my lip and pushed the door open. In the cold, sterile study, my father's forehead was already bruised and purple from kowtowing. Eric stood with his back to us, his long fingers slowly adjusting his cufflinks. I suppressed a tremor and spoke. Eric, please give us a chance. We will definitely pay you back. The air suddenly froze. Eric slowly turned around, his sharp features still laced with leftover fury. But the moment he looked up and saw me, he sucked in a sharp breath. The rage on his face froze, and his ears turned a shade of red that was impossible to miss. What money? Pay back what? Oh, right, the bride price I owe you, correct? 100 million? No, 200 million. I stared at him, my eyes wide with shock. He loosened his tie with one hand, as if he was suddenly having trouble breathing. His dark eyes locked onto mine as he said, seriously. Is that not enough? Or does Miss Wilson have a better number in mind? Don't worry, the Smiths can afford it. My dad and I just stared at each other, completely baffled by what was happening. Eric's gaze shifted to my father, a warm, almost gentle smile replacing his earlier ferocity as if it had never existed. Father-in-law, why are you kneeling on the floor? If you like this particular spot, I can have a gift wrapped for you. He strode forward and personally helped my father to his feet, his tone impossibly gentle. My dad's legs were so weak he almost buckled and knelt again. Eric then turned back to me, his amber eyes shimmering under the light. Fiancé, may I ask your name? When our eyes met, I felt my heart skip a beat. My sister had never even met Eric. Let alone me. The rumor said he was ruthless, that he'd once bankrupted a competitor overnight. But the man in front of me was tall and lean, with an innate elegance in every move. A strong nose, a sharp jawline, he was so handsome it was hard to look away. Nina. A beautiful name. Sounds like we're a perfect match. A faint smile played on his lips. Wouldn't you agree, father-in-law? Startled by being addressed, my dad jumped and nodded vigorously. In that case, the wedding is back on. We're all family now. You don't have to pay back the $100 million. In fact, I'll give the Wilsons an additional $300 million as a new bride price. Even as I was putting on the wedding dress and going through the ceremony with Eric, I felt like I was in a dream. I had actually just married him. Will the groom now serve tea to the bride's father? The officiant's booming voice pulled me back to reality. My dad sat stiffly in a formal suit, his eyes nervously darting toward Eric. Meanwhile, Eric had his head turned, staring straight at me, completely ignoring the teacup in front of him. My mom passed away when I was young, and my dad promised her he'd never remarry, raising my sister and me on his own. Eric had it even worse. Both his parents died in a car crash 5 years ago. So my dad was sitting up there all alone, a bundle of nerves. And Eric was showing no intention of serving the tea. The atmosphere grew awkward. My dad wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead and, after much hesitation, shakily picked up the teacup. Then, shall I serve you, Eric? Eric finally tore his gaze away from me, his expression still calm and composed. My apologies, father-in-law. My wife is just so beautiful, I got distracted. It should be me serving you. Then, to our complete shock, he bowed a full 90 degrees. That did it. Now my dad's legs started shaking too. The wedding finally ended, but it was a long, grueling affair. When I realized it was just me and Eric left in the enormous villa, the tension ratcheted up even more. Nina, this is your home now. You don't have to be so nervous. Eric's deep voice echoed in the living room, which only made me more nervous. I had no idea why he'd suddenly changed his mind and married me. All I could think about were the rumors of his ruthlessness, and my legs felt like jelly. To hide my anxiety, I pretended to admire a painted vase in the living room. Just as my fingertips were about to touch the porcelain, Eric's voice came from behind me. That's a pair of vases from the Qing dynasty. Cost a clean $20 million. My hand froze in mid-air. As I pulled it back, he continued. If you like them, I'll get you 10 more. 10 more would be $200 million. My eyelashes fluttered, and I barely dared to breathe. Was this some new kind of test? If he didn't like my answer, would he get angry and have me thrown into the sea to feed the fishes? The room was terrifyingly silent. Trying to break the tension, my eyes drifted to a nearby Zisha teapot. This little pot seems more delicate. Nina, you have excellent taste. Eric's voice unconsciously rose, full of genuine admiration. But it wasn't my taste, it was that anything you pointed at in his house was ridiculously expensive. Seeing my shocked expression, he changed his tune. But if you like it, I can invite the master to our home and have him make a new one just for you. My mouth twitched. I had no idea how to respond. I glanced over and noticed Eric had changed into a cream-colored loungewear set. It was casual and comfortable, but the neckline was strangely cut into a deep V, revealing a smooth, strong chest. Noticing my gaze, he casually adjusted his collar. Don't get the wrong idea. I dress like this around the house all the time. Then he leaned back on the sofa, looking completely at ease. I, on the other hand, was still in sky-high heels and a form-fitting gown. It was beautiful, but exhausting. I wanted to change into something comfortable too. But the zipper was too high, and all the house staff had vanished. After some thought, I quietly asked Eric for help. Could you help me with my zipper? His body visibly tensed. His Adam's apple bobbed as he stood up, feigning nonchalance. Of course. He stood behind me, his large frame casting a shadow that enveloped me completely. His warm breath tickled my ear, and the faint scent of cedar wood filled the air. I can't seem to find the zipper. It's an invisible one. It's about 2 inches above my waist. His fingertips were searing hot. The moment they brushed against the skin of my back, I heard his breath catch. Is this it? The ever-composed Eric's voice was now trembling. A ridiculous thought crossed my mind. Eric, you've never had a girlfriend, have you? The next second, the words just tumbled out of my mouth. Me? How could I not have had a girlfriend? I'll have you know, this kind of dress. His hands suddenly pulled with force. The silk gown split open. A sudden chill hit my skin. I spun around in a panic, but my ankle twisted, and I fell right into his scorching hot arms. Instantly, his face turned so red it looked like it could bleed. His hands hovered in the air, completely unsure of where to put them. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm not that kind of guy. In a fluster, he took off his own silk shirt and draped it over me. Leaving me with one last pained look, he fled the room. The moment Eric left, the maids reappeared as if on cue. Dinner, a full-body spa, they took care of my every need. But by the time I was tucked into bed, Eric still hadn't returned. I felt an empty ache in my chest, though I wasn't sure why I was sad. We had only just met. Did I really believe he'd fallen for me at first sight? My sister, Stella, was one of the most beautiful women in H-Town. He was willing to swap someone as gorgeous as my sister without a second thought, so what did that say about me, who was far less stunning? The tension I'd been holding all day finally eased, and I quickly fell asleep. Just then, the door was pushed open by a tall figure. It was Eric. In the dim light, his face was etched with frustration. His warm hand closed around my cool one, his voice hoarse with regret. I already screwed up my image on our first night, but you have to believe me, I'm really not that kind of person. We have plenty of time. I'll show you how good I can be to you. His gaze fell upon my face. His throat tightened, and his eyes, filled with restraint, swirled with an unusual emotion. Completely unaware, I turned over in my sleep. The strap of my loose nightgown slipped off my shoulder, revealing my delicate collarbone. His eyes darkened, and his voice dropped to a near whisper, as if he were talking to himself. I would never take advantage of someone. But we're legally married, I swear, I'm just going to kiss you. With that, his hot lips pressed against my collarbone. He lingered, kissing me over and over. It was filled with an indescribable longing. The next morning, I woke up and saw the purplish marks on my collarbone and couldn't help but complain. Eric is so rich, you'd think he could afford some decent pest control. One night and the mosquitoes have already eaten me alive. What's the rest of my life you're going to be like? Unfortunately, I didn't have much time to dwell on it. The doorknob slowly turned. Eric, who had been missing all night, was back. Behind him was a line of personal stylists from high-end luxury brands, each holding an exquisite gift box. The latest seasonal dresses, paired with dazzling, fiery jewelry. Which one do you like? He smiled, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. Or we can just keep them all. I looked down at my own white t-shirt and jeans. Was Eric implying I looked shabby? I pursed my lips and quietly retorted, but I have to go to campus. Wearing this seems a little inappropriate. Campus. His voice suddenly shot up, startling me. What year are you? I'm a junior. His sudden reaction left me a bit dazed. He let out a visible sigh of relief, his tense body instantly relaxing. Thank God, thank God. Then he turned to the butler. Get the car ready. I looked at him, confused, but he had already regained his usual composure, a faint smile on his face. I'll drive you. In a daze, I found myself in the passenger seat. Eric was so different from the rumors. They were practically two different people. What kind of game was he playing? The familiar scent of cedar filled my nose. I instinctively looked up, and my lips brushed against his cheek. His skin was smooth, with almost no visible pores. It was surprisingly soft. Suddenly, I heard a click. It turned out he had been leaning over to buckle my seatbelt. But what had I just done? My heart felt like it was going to pound out of my chest, and my face instantly flushed. I cautiously watched his reaction, terrified of angering the notoriously volatile Eric. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the steering wheel. His deep eyes were fixed straight ahead, as if he were trying to suppress some powerful emotion. His cheeks were tinged with an unnatural red, and even his shoulders were faintly trembling. He was that angry. "Eric, I'm so sorry, I really didn't mean to," I explained in a shaky voice, but he just stared at me in silence for a long moment. "Nina, we're married now." The next second, he floored the gas, and the car shot forward like an arrow. Why did it feel like he got even angrier after I apologized? A 20-minute walk turned into a 30-minute drive. Just as I felt I was about to suffocate from the tense atmosphere, the car came to a sudden stop. We were finally at the university. "Thank you, Eric." I practically flew out of the car, running right into a classmate, Olivia. He glanced at the Rolls-Royce behind me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Nina, I know you got that scholarship, but you don't have to splurge on a private car to get to school." I was mortified, unsure how to respond, when Eric's deep voice came from behind me. "It's a private car, all right. But it's free. It's a special service, just for my wife." Eric's words were loaded, but Olivia, with his usual lack of subtlety, just laughed. "Whoa, another suitor? Let me tell you, our department's queen isn't that easy to win over. Come on. I'll treat you to bubble tea," he said, reaching out to grab my arm. But before he could even touch my sleeve, Eric swiftly moved between us. He wrapped a long arm around me, pulling me into his side in a silent declaration of ownership. "Friend, if you don't know Nina's last name, let me inform you. It's Nina." His tall frame cast a shadow over Olivia. His voice was unhurried but carried the undeniable weight of a powerful man. "And one more correction. I'm not her suitor. I'm her legal, certified, on-the-books husband." Olivia, just a kid, had never faced anything like this. His confidence immediately evaporated. Even the class genius couldn't win over an eye. He glanced at Eric and swallowed hard. "You two look at least 5 years apart. How was I supposed to know you're her husband?" Olivia never thought before he spoke, but I never imagined he could be this thoughtless. Seeing Eric's face darken, I quickly tried to smooth things over. "Honey, it's my fault. I just haven't had a chance to share the good news with everyone yet." The man who had just been radiating power suddenly had red ears, and his voice softened. "It's not your fault." But when he turned back to Olivia, his eyes were once again cold and dismissive. Even the business card he offered seemed like a handout. "You're welcome to intern at S Corp. When you get the chance." He paused, then added meaningfully, "though your chances are slim." Olivia looked down at the business card, and his face went pale. And I let out a long sigh of relief. I was distracted all day. My mind was filled with the image of Eric as he was leaving. "Nina, I'll pick you up after class." His warm breath seemed to still linger by my ear, his husky voice like a feather tickling my heart. A smile I didn't even realize was there played on my lips. The moment the bell rang, I rushed out of the classroom. Under the pink sunset, I spotted Eric's figure from a distance. But he looked different today. Usually in a suit, he was uncharacteristically wearing a simple but high-quality white t-shirt. A pair of light brown casual pants outlined his long, straight legs. The setting sun cast a warm glow on him, softening the usual sharpness of his features. Golden light danced in his hair as he leaned against the Rolls-Royce, attracting glances from passing students. I was mesmerized. I never realized that beneath the shell of a business elite, he could look so young and make my heart skip a beat. I couldn't imagine what a big shot he must have been back when he was in school. "What, you don't like it?" His eyes darted away, his tone a little unnatural. I suddenly realized that the great tycoon of H-Town was actually thin-skinned. He wasn't as terrifying as the rumors made him out to be. My courage grew, and I gave him a thumbs up. "I love it. You look amazing." Sure enough, his face turned red again. On the way home, he seemed to be in a particularly good mood. His fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel, and he even tried to make small talk with me. You know, older men know how to dote on their partners. But this topic. Out of courtesy, I didn't interrupt him. He continued, completely serious. The best age gap for a couple is 5 years, and of course, I mean with the man being older. In 5 years, he has plenty of time to build his career. He can pave the way for his future family, so the person he loves can suffer less, avoid pitfalls, and do whatever she wants. I was completely baffled. When our eyes met, he suddenly asked with a dead serious expression. Nina, I happen to be exactly 5 years older than you. You get what I'm saying, right? I instinctively shook my head, but when I saw his brow start to furrow, I quickly nodded in a panic. But, I really didn't get it. If Eric was acting a little strange at the university, back at home, he was acting completely, utterly bizarre. First, he changed into a smoky gray silk robe. It was simple, loose. It amplified his cool, aloof aura to the max, making him look like a nobleman who had stepped out of a painting. But he didn't seem satisfied. He kept looking at himself in the mirror, his brow furrowing deeper. Next, he went into the walk-in closet and came out in a set of preppy, cotton pajamas. It wasn't as luxurious as the robe, but it made him look youthful and full of life. My brain instantly connected the dots. I think I finally understood why Eric had suddenly changed his style. Honey, youth has nothing on maturity. Don't take what Olivia said to heart. Exposed, he looked completely embarrassed. You think I'd lower myself to argue with that little brat? What a joke. But the blush spreading across his face betrayed him. I never thought Eric could have such an adorable side. Right. My husband is the most handsome. Under the warm yellow light, he looked down at me, a strange glint in his deep eyes. Tempting and dangerous. A man's looks are just superficial. What's important is what's on the inside. I looked at him, confused. He raised a hand and slowly started unbuttoning his shirt. 1, 2. As his shirt opened, the contours of his firm chest became visible between the fabric. I couldn't help but swallow. The direction this was going seemed very, very wrong. In a daze, I realized he was standing right in front of me. His shirt was barely hanging on, revealing a perfect set of 8-pack abs. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. But my eyes seemed to be glued to him, unable to look away. Honey. Right now, he looked like a hunter stalking his prey, ready to devour me at any moment. I tried the same trick from earlier, calling him sweetly. But I didn't realize that was like throwing gasoline on a newly lit fire. His hot palms suddenly enveloped my hand, pressing it against his firm, powerful chest as his lips brushed against my earlobe. Nina, it's time our marriage became a real one. He drew out the last word, his warm breath caressing my neck. My mind went blank. I think I knew what he meant. As newcomers to this particular activity, we were like two fumbling students, our first practical lesson inevitably clumsy. Fortunately, we were both fast learners. After a few tries, we got the hang of it. And Eric proved, through his actions, that he was indeed a perpetual motion machine, both inside and out. Once he got a taste, he was insatiable. It wasn't until the sun was high in the sky that I finally stirred from the bed. But the space next to me was already empty. As I wondered where he was, a commotion erupted downstairs. You, Eric. Get your ass out here. That old man John might be afraid of you, but I'm not. I shot up in bed. That was my sister's voice. Wincing, I threw on a robe and hurried downstairs. I'd heard a story once about someone who tried to show off in front of Eric and was run out of H-Town. My sister was in danger. By the time I got downstairs, it seemed Eric had just arrived too. My sister, held by 2 bodyguards in black, saw me and her eyes immediately turned red. Especially when her gaze swept over the purple marks on my neck. Nina, I'm sorry I'm late. I sent you 50 million, why didn't you run? My sister was sobbing her heart out, and I was just confused. What 50 million? Her tear-streaked face froze. You don't know? It's on that card you use for school. Stella, I don't have text alerts turned on. My sister looked up at the ceiling and cried even harder. It's my fault. I was in such a rush to leave, I forgot to tell you. The second I heard Eric was some bald, murderous, totally perverted old man, I packed my bags and ran that night. She threw her arms around me. John is a monster, selling his own daughter for profit. No. It's that creep Eric. He wouldn't even leave a good girl like you alone. But don't worry, I'm back now. I'll take the punishment. Suddenly, my sister's voice trailed off. She stared past me, sucking in a sharp breath. I followed her gaze and saw Eric's silhouette standing against the light. The morning sun outlined him in gold, and even the shadow cast by his eyelashes was perfect. My sister's rage visibly short-circuited. Who is this hottie? Is he the butler? Head of security? She shook her head. He's way too classy for that. Wait, is he one of the Smiths' illegitimate sons? Without another thought, she walked over to him, all friendly. Hey handsome, got a girlfriend? Mind if you get one more? Her bejeweled fingers were about to land on Eric's shoulder when I grabbed her and pulled her back. Stella, I whispered, that is Eric. Time seemed to stand still for a second. My sister mechanically turned her head, her gaze sliding from Eric's chiseled jawline down to his well-defined hands, finally settling on his deep, inscrutable eyes. That's impossible. That night I distinctly heard them say Eric was an ugly old man. Ugly, old, man. Eric repeated her words, one by one. I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. Fearing he would fly into a rage and throw my sister into the sea, I impulsively threw my arms around him and yelled at my sister. Stella. Run. My sister ran. Right under the noses of dozens of tall, brawny bodyguards. It didn't take a genius to figure out Eric had let her go. Logically, I should have been happy. But thinking about the way my sister looked at Eric, I felt an indescribable tightness in my chest. This marriage was never meant for me in the first place. I thought, it's time to give it back to my sister. Eric. Eric looked at me, and his expression immediately dimmed. A sharp pain shot through my heart. He'd only seen my sister once, and he was already this cold to me? Let's get a divorce. The person you wanted was my sister all along. Now that she's back, it's time for me to leave. My nails dug into my palms as I forced myself to say those bitter words with a casual air. Eric stared at me, a vein throbbing in his forehead as he tried to contain his anger. You think I wanted Stella? He said it through clenched teeth, each word squeezed out. Isn't that the truth? If my sister hadn't believed those rumors, you two would be the perfect, enviable couple right now. His face grew even darker. You think your sister and I should be a couple? I didn't know why Eric was so angry, but it was a fact. I nodded. Eric froze instantly. The next second, he turned and stalked upstairs without looking back. Eric didn't come down for lunch. The entire villa was blanketed in an invisible low pressure, and even the maids were walking on eggshells. Just as my stomach started to growl, the butler appeared with a line of chefs. Madam, Eric hired these 5-star chefs especially for you. Please see if their cooking suits your taste. The next moment, the 7-meter-long dining table was covered with all kinds of dishes. I couldn't resist the temptation. As I ate my fill, I tried my best to maintain some elegance. But even after I was full, Eric still hadn't come down. Isn't Eric eating? I asked the butler. The butler didn't answer, simply bringing me dessert with a polite smile. There's still a piece of cake here, would you? The cake was exquisite and looked very tempting. Just leave it here. I can finish it. The smile on the butler's face froze. A moment later, the sound of a cup shattering came from upstairs. I flinched, silently thanking my lucky stars. At least it wasn't me who had pissed off Eric. But, why did the butler look so strange? Just as I was about to leave for school, the butler stopped me. Madam, the items you selected have arrived. Where would you like them placed? The butler bowed slightly, but I was stunned by the massive procession behind him. There were people holding silk-lined boxes, pushing display racks, and even carefully carrying glass display cases. But I hadn't bought anything recently. I stood there, completely baffled. The consultants, however, were already launching into their enthusiastic introductions. Madam, this is the pair of Qing dynasty vases Eric sent for you. This Zisha teapot was custom made for you by my master. This jewelry set is a global exclusive, valued at $80 million. Eric is so good to you. The more I listened, the paler my face became. Was Eric trying to win me over? Or was this his typically extravagant way of giving me a parting gift? Between the two, I leaned toward the latter. Time ticked by. I couldn't stand the guesswork anymore, this slow, torturous waiting. I grabbed 2 pieces of jewelry and headed for the second-floor study. The moment I pushed the door open, a smile touched Eric's lips, full of undisguised joy. He glanced at the ruby ring in my hand and lifted his chin arrogantly. You don't have to come thank me specially. It's nothing valuable, and besides, there's plenty more where that came from. My heart sank. It confirmed my suspicions. So, is this the breakup fee? I tilted my head up stubbornly, refusing to let my tears fall. In that case, Eric, when are we getting a divorce? His pupils contracted sharply. The earlier joy and composure vanished, replaced by an endless gloom. The next second, he slammed me against the wall, his voice low and husky with a warning. You want to divorce me that badly? Am I not good enough? Am I not good enough to you? The corners of his eyes were red, his gaze filled with a fierce possessiveness. In that moment, I actually started to doubt myself. Maybe Eric didn't want a divorce. Before I could think, he cupped the back of my head and an overwhelming kiss fell upon my lips. He didn't let go until I was breathless and weak. Nina, you want a divorce? In your dreams. The door slammed shut behind Eric. My tears finally broke free, streaming down my face. Only now, belatedly, did I realize it. I think I'd fallen for Eric. Maybe it was when I first saw him, his silhouette against the light so dazzling. Maybe it was on our ridiculous wedding night, when he ran away looking so utterly adorable. Or maybe it was just now, when he said he didn't want a divorce, the possessive determination in his eyes so moving. Whenever he got close, my heart would race. The thought of divorcing him felt like a knife to the heart. I saw love and reluctance in his restrained eyes, too. But then I remembered the way my sister's eyes lit up when she looked at him, and I felt like a thief. She was the one who was supposed to be by his side, and I was just an accidental detour. Our beginning was a mistake. I couldn't keep squatting in a place that wasn't mine. The story had to get back on its proper track. That evening, I took a special rose bath. I changed into the most daring piece of lingerie I had ever worn. The fabric was nearly transparent, with a cutout design at the waist that showed off my figure perfectly. I thought, I'll just indulge myself this one last time. Give this relationship a proper, final chapter. But my hand hadn't even touched the doorknob when Eric burst in, furious. Nina, you'd go this far just to divorce me? His deep eyes were smoldering with anger, but it flashed and then faded, replaced by a look of utter desolation and despair. Is that really how you see me? Am I that despicable in your eyes? My heart felt like it was being squeezed, making it hard to breathe. I never imagined that the titan of the business world could look so lost, like a confused child. As I looked down, a notification popped up on my phone. Today's trending news. H-Town tycoon forcibly marries the Wilson's daughter. The dark side of Eric. The heartbreaking truth behind the union. The pitiful sacrifice, Nina. All the articles painted the Wilsons as a helpless victim, easily manipulated by Eric. And I was portrayed as an innocent woman, used by my father and abused by Eric. No wonder Eric thought I was behind it. Please, believe me. In a panic, I tugged on his sleeve, but my gaze was unwavering. It really wasn't me. His eyes bore into me, so intense it felt like he could see right through me. Only then did I remember I was still wearing my carefully chosen battle armor. I'm sorry, I was being impulsive. You're just an innocent girl. You wouldn't do something like this. His attitude shifted so quickly it gave me whiplash. I watched as his face grew redder, his hot fingertips tracing my waist, caressing me back and forth. Obsessed, longing. But in the end, he gritted his teeth and pulled his hand away. I will get to the bottom of this. You get some rest. He was about to run again. In a moment of desperation, I wrapped my arms tightly around his trim waist. His body instantly tensed. I'm a little scared by myself. Can you stay? My voice was as quiet as a mosquito, but every word reached Eric's ears. I felt his body tremble slightly. Finally, he nodded forcefully. Okay. Why did you grab me? Are you trying to silence me? If you've got any guts, let my sister go. I'll fight you to the death. Just as I thought I was still dreaming, Eric's deep, cold voice cut through the air, laced with a clear warning. Shoo! She's still sleeping. But the next second, my sister's shrill scream scared the last bit of sleep right out of me. What? My sister is the most disciplined girl I know. She's not up yet? What did you do to her last night? You pervert. She got more and more agitated, her voice nearly loud enough to tear the roof off. 20 million for that social media smear was too little. I should have thrown the whole 100 million at it. Let everyone in H-Town see your true colors, Eric. I had just reached the bottom of the stairs, and my body froze. Stella, you bought the trending topics. 2 pairs of eyes immediately snapped to me. The next second, my sister shot forward like a mother hen, pulling me behind her. I scraped together the money to pay Eric back and get you out of here, and he had the nerve to tell me it was a no-go. But don't worry, even if it's the last thing I do, I'm getting you out of here today. Look at your poor face. She cupped my face tenderly, then her expression suddenly turned strange. Why did you get chubbier? Beside us, Eric actually chuckled. He reached a hand out to me, his voice unbelievably gentle. Nina, I was wrong before. Please, let's not get a divorce, okay? His eyes were soft, his gaze clear and bright, like a big, sad puppy. There was no trace of the cold, ruthless tycoon. My sister's eyes went wide, her expression like she'd just eaten something foul. You too, something's not right here. Before I could explain, a long, strong arm wrapped around my waist. The world spun, and I was pulled securely into Eric's arms. When he looked down at me, his eyes were filled with undisguised tenderness. But when he turned to my sister, his gaze instantly turned to ice. Stella, I admit I was rash at first. The rumors all said you were the most beautiful woman in H-Town, so without even meeting you, I sent the bride price. But that was before I met Nina. His thumb gently stroked my cheek, his tone arrogant and proud. Most beautiful woman in H-Town? Please, she's got nothing on Nina. My sister's face instantly turned black. I quickly tugged on Eric's sleeve, feeling a pang of guilt. To be put down like that by someone she liked, she must be so hurt. Stella, I'm sorry. I bit my lip and gathered my courage. I've fallen for Eric. The moment the words left my mouth, Eric's grip on my hand tightened. His breathing hitched, his eyes filled with starlight, and his whole being seemed to light up. My sister, on the other hand, just roared in frustration. Why are you apologizing to me because you like him? You should have just said so. I wouldn't have come back and made all this trouble. I should have been like Dad, taking the money and living the good life. It's true what they say, you should always listen to your elders. Then her eyes lit up, as if she'd had another idea. She grabbed my arm, her tone wheedling. That 50 million I transferred you, is there any left? I blew all my money on the smear campaign and the bots. My wallet is cleaner than my face right now. How about you spot me some cash? It's not for me, really. It's just that I got a new college boy yesterday, and a girl's gotta show him she's got it, right? That was my sister. To think that just yesterday I was crying myself to sleep over the thought that she also liked Eric, only for her to tell me today that she already had a new man. On the verge of tears, I pulled out the bank card. And Eric, standing beside me, added one of his own. You helped Nina be honest about her feelings for me. You were an unwitting wing woman. Thanks. My sister snatched both cards, moving so fast it was like she was afraid we'd change our minds, and bolted for the door. Eric suddenly let out a low laugh, a rare moment of kindness toward my sister. Stella, come visit any time. She stopped in her tracks, turned, and glared at him with disgust. You want to use me as a prop in your kinky games again? No way. The door slammed shut, and the villa was quiet once more. I looked up and met Eric's gaze. His eyes were as gentle as a spring pond, its shimmering surface reflecting only me. In that moment, I finally believed he had fallen for me at first sight. It turned out that love at first sight didn't mean I had to be the most beautiful person in the world. It just meant that in his eyes, I always would be. My heart began to race again. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed his cheek. He sucked in a breath, his eyes instantly darkening. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his voice low and husky. Nina, do you know the consequences of messing with me? I blinked, utterly shameless. Of course I do. I was only in it for your looks from the very beginning. He let out a low laugh and leaned in close, his warm breath tickling my ear. Funny. Me too.